John Woodhead, Woody to his friends, on his very first season, his very first day as a commercial fishing skipper, had to fire his very first crewman on his very first day on Bristol Bay, Alaska, where the up and down of the tides can run 30 feet. And currents are so strong that sometimes fishermen are justified in paying more attention to the physical needs of their anchors than to the emotional needs of their spouses. That young crewman couldn't set an anchor, didn't know how, which was fine. Woody had taught him. But he didn't want to learn. He wanted to argue about it based on his 2 hours of fishing experience. Woody thought about a season of arguing with this guy, and he shook his head and took him back to the dock, and as we say, beached him with a harsh word. You might say that was a little bit rough of Woody, but Woody'd had he'd had a rough winter himself. His father had died, old Fish Woodhead. And on his deathbed, he had left Woody, the family boat, the fishing vessel Stewbudge. And he left it in meticulous, beautifully maintained condition, what we call Norwegian anal maintenance. The paint work and the bright work, the gear and all that. It's just, that galley was so clean you could fix a meal in there and put your plate right on the table. It was nice. But the Stewbudge did have a little engine, maybe an engine problem, a little tick-tick-tick sound in the top end, tick-tick-tick-tick-tick, which might be a valve, but most likely just a lifter and no big whoop. But it bothered the old man. It troubled old Fish as if his life's work was yet undone. So he decided to push the burden down onto the next generation. Woody, you must promise me you'll overhaul the Stewbudge, and until you get to it, baby her. Keep the revolutions down. Don't run her at full throttle. Can you promise, Woody? Or Woody? Well, it was his father's dying wish. So, of course, Woody promised. But there's a Norse tradition of deathbed negotiations, so he did have the presence of mind to give himself a little bit of wiggle room. He says, yeah, okay, Dad, I promised to baby the Budge. I'll keep the revs down. I won't run her full throttle. I'll stay out of the smoke hole. But unless there's a case of a big emergency. Well, old Fish was old school. To him, a serious emergency meant compound fracture with arterial bleeding, or catastrophic fire, engine blown, boat dead in the water on a lee shore, blowing into the breakers, stuff like that. So he accepted Woody's promise. He says, oh, thank you, Woody, I accept your promise, and now I can die content. And he did. So with his crewman fired and his father contentedly dead, Woody had to fish that season all alone. And he did a pretty good job. Bred to the sea, Woody could handle it. The hardest part was actually pulling up to a tender to deliver. He had to baby the Stewbudge on in there, and then quick hop out of the wheelhouse to tie her off with a dock line. And sometimes that took a couple of tries, especially tricky in weather. Imagine Woody's pleased surprise one howling evening. He's pulling up to the tender vessel short weight when a vision of feminine loveliness in full reindeer panoply with extra tough rubber boots danced bow-legged across the deck and of the short weight, and very casually threw a loop on Woody's cleat and gentled the Stewbudge in and tired her off. All this one-handed. She had a clipboard in her other hand and was reading the scales and accurately calling out weights while doing this. Woody was impressed. Not only that, she was gorgeous. Okay, you couldn't he couldn't see too much in all that reindeer, but her hands just stuck out, and you could see that she had red, short fingers, strong ones, fingers that work. And below the waterline, he could see that she was well-founded, well-rounded, seaworthy. Topsides, well, again, she had a raincoat on. She might have had a life jacket on under there, but Woody thought she might be naturally flirtatious. But these things did not matter because she had such a warm smile for Woody and a dimple on her chin and that perfectly round face and a perfectly round head. It's like one of those cannonball net weights. And as she filled in his fish ticket, a little bit of fog condensed onto the hairs of her cookie duster, and it was almost like she had a silver mask on. Woody was gobsmacked with this young woman. But you know, there's 40 or 50 guys to every good-looking young woman in the Bristol Bay fleet. It is not polite to flirt or to pester them, and Woody's a very polite young man, so he takes his fish ticket and he's getting ready to go back to the stew budge and about his business, when a favorable gust of wind blew a little bit of, well, really a wad of gurry off a nearby sack of fish happened to be hanging from a nearby crane. And that you know, it's quite a mucusy piece of gurry. It had some scales in it for body and quite a little blood in it. It flew through the air, a gurry looby, and it landed right on this young lady's nose. Her name, incidentally, was Cora. She had her name on a reindeer. You can see that. So the looby of gurry landed on her nose, and it stuck there, and it hung down the side like the snood on a Thanksgiving turkey. Naturally, Cora just pulled her hat out from under the hood of her reindeer and used it to scrape that looby off without getting her hands dirty, so she could keep filling in, you know, writing fish tickets. And Woody was shocked. On her hat, she had a picture of Minnie Mouse. Woody was wearing a hat with a picture of Mickey Mouse. It was more than fate. It was an act of God. That woman and me, we are meant to be together. Well, Cora was actually maybe a little interested in Woody too. He's a well set up young man, obviously a fine fisherman out there, single-handed, and you know, he had a lantern jaw, and those stick-out elephant ears were kind of cute. And Cora wouldn't be the first well-brought-up young lady in Alaska to overlook an overbite. But Woody's suit did not prosper. The problem was Cora's physical presence was so overwhelming that it made him tongue-tied. Cora saw the problem, tried to help. She would throw him conversational lobs. So, Woody, the weather's getting a little better. The rain's letting down. I think the wind might lie down too. Or something complimentary. Ooh, Woody, that's a nice catch you got there. I think you're high boat again this tide. Later in the season, this went on, she started to tease him just a little bit. So, Woody, have you been working on your talking dolphin imitation? It was just too humiliating and frustrating for Woody. Back in the wheelhouse, he pondered long and hard what to do. He just had to speak with Cora. Well, as a fisherman, Woody's used to thinking outside the box, however slowly. And it occurred to him that if Cora's physical presence rendered him tongue-tied, maybe her metaphysical presence would make him talkative. And there is nothing on God's earth more metaphysical then an open channel on a VHF great ham. Short wait, this is Stubudge. Stubudge, this is short wait, back to the call. Nice to hear from you, Woody. What's going on? Well, hi Cora, I just thought I'd call, I'm gonna deliver. I'm coming in as a heads up, I'm gonna deliver. Well, that's fine, Woody, we welcome your fish. But you better hurry if you're delivering here. We're gonna pull up the anchor in about 20 minutes and go back to the plant and unload. And Woody, our season's over, our charter ends today. We're gonna fuel up, and tonight's tide, we head to Prince William Sound. Prince William Sound? End of the charter, end of the season, 20 minutes? Dang! No problem, no worries there, short wait, I'll be there in 15. Keep the anchor down, keep that crane running. What's to do? Short wait's only about a mile away from Woody, but she's straight up tide. He's fighting a 4-knot current, and he's in what amounts to a 5-knot boat. Well, let's see. 5 knots minus 4, that makes 1, and 60 minutes divide. Well, Woody was not a scientific or mathematical navigator, but based on his years of seagoing experience, he could see that he was not going to cover a mile in 20 minutes at 1 knot over the ground. And he could just see Cora in her gear through his binoculars on deck on the short wave. And he wasn't maybe ever gonna see her again. So Woody then he reached inside himself and he came to a realization, and then he made a decision. He said, I am the captain of this fishing boat. I am responsible